Record. Okay. So I went ahead and hit record. So welcome everybody to the Holiday Perspective Pep Talk. Thank you for joining me, and apologies for having to move us from last Thursday to Tuesday. I know we're in the middle of the week where everyone's traveling and it gets increasingly chaotic by the day. So I wasn't surprised that a lot of people were hoping that we could record this and then send it out. So we'll make sure that we send an email blast out to anybody that attends and anybody that signed up so that they can watch it or listen to it at their leisure. But very excited to be able to chat. This is one of my favorite talks to do every year. And what I wanted to note is, as always, it is free. But the one thing I do want to make sure we make you aware of is that I did start a nonprofit organization last year called the Chronic Disease Health Alliance. And the CDHA, it's tasked with helping provide nutrition education and nutrition access to low-income communities in the Pittsburgh area. And so we've been working in the Homewood community this year, and we've been working in the Stowe Rocks community dominantly. Those have been the two places that we've been running diabetes prevention program classes. We offer nutrition visits, and we've also been doing some meal support for families that have low access to food. And so the CDHA won't just do case-specific nutrition things. It's also a group that has physicians and physical therapists and other group members involved. And the hope is that we can use it to sort of bridge the gap to preventive care for families that don't have it. And so we are in our Giving Tuesday campaign, and that is to say that we are accepting donations. I will make sure that the link exists at the end of this talk in an email that we send out to you. And if you are able to donate whatever amount feels relevant to the price of the information given, is what we'll say. And so no obligation, but an invitation to join us. We've been really excited by some of the work we've been able to do with those communities this year, reversing diabetes and chronic disease and providing education to areas that really don't have the access like we think they should. So thank you for your consideration with that. And I'm happy to provide more links on the Chronic Disease Health Alliance and some of the ventures that we're a part of. But without further ado, this is the chance for me to rant and ramble a little bit about some of my favorite topics, which is navigating the holiday season. And so I'm going to dive into it. And because we do have a smaller group, I think what I will do is I'll talk through my pieces, and then I'll try and leave a little bit of time left. And if anybody has questions, I'll pause the recording, and then I'll take questions, and you can pick my brain if you'd like. So this time of year is always a little bit crazy. And, if you've followed any of my social media, I've been doing some little promo posts kind of talking about some of our key thoughts. But really, the core vision I like to share is this is a time to work on trying to live like the healthiest you. I think that one of the problems in our society is that we have very all or nothing thinking a lot of the time. And the holidays bring that to light, right? We either just say, well, if it's the holidays and I have a ton of social events, screw it, I'll figure it out in January. Or we say, no, I'm not going to let the holidays get me this year. And then we avoid everything. And we end up being frustrated, anxious, or nervous in social occasions. We end up, not really enjoying our time with friends, family, and loved ones. We start to treat a good thing like a bad thing because it's, getting in the way. And so we tend to do this all or nothing scenario. And the reality is that our hope is that we can let this time be a chance to live like the healthiest you. And so a fun visual I like to give with this in mind is, let's say, as an example, you're currently working on lifestyle changes and you're trying to lose some weight, just as an example, right? In that example, the most common way that people try and lose weight right now is they starve themselves. They really, really restrict. And so they're not actually living like the healthiest version of themselves, right? So say you weigh 300 pounds and ideally you'd weigh 200 pounds. The common metric is to eat like you weigh 100 pounds. So you lose weight really, really quickly. And then you'll just figure it out when you get to 200. But the problem is when you arrive at your weight loss goal, you haven't lived like the 200-pound you. So you don't know what that person does day to day. You don't know how they exercise, how they eat, how they move. You know how 300-pound you lives, and you know how 100-pound you lives. And unfortunately, that means you're going to probably yo-yo back and forth between the two. You're going to have periods where you say screw it, you eat everything and anything in sight like 300-pound you, and you're going to have moments where you're going to be hyper restrictive and you're only going to eat lettuce and chicken breast, and that's going to be 100-pound you. And then your mind over time will start to say that the 100-pound you is healthy, even though it's not. And so you have this time where you're eating healthy and not healthy. And the reality is, both of them are not healthy. What I like to challenge people to do instead is think about, in this example, how do you live like the 200-pound you? So for me, like, what's that guy about? How does he navigate his day to day? He probably does things differently than 300-pound him. And he also probably does things differently than 100-pound him. So why are we going to go into the holidays like 300 or 100-pound us when we could go in and learn to do it like 200-pound us? And that's a fun thing to think about, right? If 100-pound you ignores everything and 300-pound you eats everything, 200-pound you may in fact just find that sweet spot where there's certain things that are a yes and then there's plenty of things that are a no. And so some of the things I want to dig in today are that concept, sort of, in a couple different perspectives. Hopefully it shakes up your perspective and really resonates with you. But basically, I'm going to challenge you to live like the healthiest version of you. The healthiest version of you doesn't abandon favored foods and special occasions. The healthiest version of you is able to participate in those things. He or she just may do that differently than you do currently. So we lean into this time of year as a chance to really learn, right? The holiday season is a chance to learn how to navigate. And what I challenge each of you to do is to go into this season hoping to enjoy certain things and then also come out on the other side feeling like you took care of self and you also participated. I like to think of that as a tightrope in a lot of ways, right? We're trying to find, if there's sort of a careful balance here where we don't want to go too far one way or too far the other way. It can feel that way, but as you start to find it, just like anything, it gets easier and easier and easier. I will also call out a common tendency. And this is actually something that I think is beyond just the holidays, but it really shows up this time of year. And it's sort of that tendency of humans to wait for clear skies to do the sailing, so to speak, which is the amount of times that people wait for perfect conditions to start working on their health and wellness. And all of us know in reality, life is always a bit crazy, life is always a bit chaotic, and so that perfect time frame doesn't live, it doesn't exist, and if it does happen, it doesn't last long. And so we really shouldn't be trying to live in these perfect conditions or wait for them. You're going to be waiting a really long time. And so what ends up happening, especially in like holiday seasons or other busy times of year, is we get busy, we get overwhelmed, and then our default is to abandon our health and self-care, right? Can't make it to the gym. Food is catch as catch can. No more meal prepping, no more meal planning, no more consistent grocery shopping. We're just, all the habits go out the window and we're just shooting from the hip, doing what we can. And what I would note is that the healthier version of you figures out ways to double down on those habits. And that doesn't mean do them more, but it means prioritize them more. So, for example, there's a big difference between on a Sunday knowing you're having going to have a busy week and then saying, I'll just figure out food this week. I can't think about that right now. And then setting yourself up to have to make a spontaneous food decision 3 to 4 times a day, every day, which is a stress add, and it also means that you're not likely going to make the best decisions, versus recognizing, hey, because I have a busy week, this is a really good time for me to make sure I get some groceries and make sure I get some meals ready. Same thing with exercise. It's really easy to go, I'm not doing walks this week. It's like, well, we could double down on it and actually make sure we're getting it. Maybe we just need to change how it's set up. Maybe we don't have an hour. Maybe we only have 30 minutes, but we will take that. Or maybe we carve out something at lunch, or maybe we do something in the morning or in the evening. The idea is that instead of just letting it be something that we punt to the future, we choose to double down on it and protect it and preserve it in some way. We recognize that when our life is most stressful and most chaotic, that's when those habits are needed the most. And the reason that becomes relevant this time of year is because today is the 26th. So for the next 30 days, there's going to be a lot of events. There's going to be Christmas parties. There's going to be cookie baking days. There's going to be all the holidays that exist. There are a lot of events. And as a result, it can feel really easy to treat this entire month like it's one event when it's reality there's probably 5 events in the next 30 days. And as a side note, that means flip that. There are 25 days that are just normal days. They're not anything special or out of the ordinary. They're just days. They're just going to be a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And we're allowed to treat them as such. And so when you take the time to double down on your habits, that will allow you to treat normal days as normal. It will allow you to better prepare for the fun days, whether that's mentally or from a food perspective, whatever it is. It'll improve that awareness. It will allow you to slow things down so you don't just kind of blur out and feel like the next 5 weeks disappear. We need to take them a day at a time, and so that is one of my favorite things to think about is this is a chance to double down on the habits. Yes, there's going to be traveling. Yes, there's going to be social events. Is there a chance to still get a good workout in a few days a week, depending on how often you normally exercise? Are there creative ways to get movement? You may not be able to do your normal routine, but can you do something in its stead? Are there times when we should be making sure groceries exist? If we're coming back from a 4-day weekend with family and we know next week is just a week, can we make sure that there's groceries, whether it's because they get delivered, you go into your Instacart or your Whole Foods on the drive home and you schedule grocery delivery for an extra $5 on top. But instead of having to find time, you then walk home, get home, and 30 minutes after you get there, someone rings your doorbell with the groceries, and now you're set up for the week. These are examples of small things you can do that can double down, that can set you up to have an event, get back to normal, have an event, get back to normal. Learning to ebb and flow in the chaos is part of it. So instead of avoiding it and waiting for it to get easy, you're much better off learning to sway with it, learning to navigate with it. And there is no better time than the holidays to test and trial that out. I've been talking a little bit about on my Instagram in particular, what I call the Goldilocks approach. And it's one of my favorite analogies that I've created over the years. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward one, so I won't beat it to death. But it does have a key point, which is, there was the Papa Bear that it was too hot, the Mama Bear was too cold, and the Baby Bear was just right. And I always like to say that Papa Bear going in too hot, that's going into the holiday season, just saying, screw it, I'm going to eat everything and drink everything in sight, and I'll figure it out in January. Mama Bear too cold, that's her deciding she's going to ignore all the holidays and be super nervous and avoid participation. Baby Bear figured it out. Baby Bear in that story, right, in the story of Goldilocks, is the symbol or the example of moderation. And we're taught that as children, that moderation is really ideal. Extremes are rarely the right decision. Moderation is the key, and moderation is mastery. And what I mean by that is when you learn how to moderate things, you are then officially in control. Right? To avoid things is not to control them, it is to be controlled by them. To overindulge in them is not to control them, it is to be controlled by them. The only way to truly be in the driver's seat is if you're actually the one driving, right? And that is to say, you are allowing yourself the free will to say yes or to say no, to prioritize things or to deprioritize things. And while that can feel harder, it may be harder in the short term, but it is much easier in the long term because the alternative is what most people fall into, which is this too hot, too cold, back and forth, which is not ideal for mind or body. And so we want to practice being Baby Bear, is one of my favorite things to describe it as. Let's balance this moderation. Let's find the just right. And the just right, there's a couple things that I'm a big fan of as sort of quick tips for you with this holiday season. And so, doing it just right, one of those things is the exception mindset. There's a lot of interesting research on this, but the idea is humans, we have a way we can perceive an exception. And so let's say you've been in a really good rhythm, hitting your workouts and, you know, buying your food at the grocery store and prepping your food and, having good meals mostly at home and eating more vegetables, right? You're checking your boxes, you're doing real well. Then you have a day, whether it's a holiday like we're approaching, like a Thanksgiving, where it's not that, right? And so instead of eating sensibly and moving, you lounge around and watch sports and you eat more than you normally do, right? A normal Thanksgiving experience for most of us. Well, in that moment or at the end of that day, there are two choices. You can either decide that that day was the start of a new trend, which is to say your eating well and being sensible is now over and your eating gluttonously and absent-mindedly is now begun, or you can decide that it was an exception to the norm. The comment being that you can predict somebody's, really, you can predict their behaviors fairly accurately by getting to know what their perception of this is. And so if they look at Thanksgiving and say, yeah, it's just a fun holiday, it's a chance to enjoy some good food and be around family, and it's a little crazy and I definitely always end up a little stuffed, but like it's just a day, it's no big deal. That is an example of they're considering it an exception to their norm, which means their inner dialogue and their norm is still, yeah, most days I eat well, I prioritize protein and produce, I eat main meals, I stay hydrated, I get exercise, I get out of breath when I can. The exception isn't going to change their behaviors. It's just a singular event, which means over the next 10 days, they're more likely to resume their normal behaviors. The alternative is also true. If the person decides that that was the start of a trend, like, man, I was on such a good streak, I was doing so well, I fell off the horse, that language, that tends to lead to people go, well, while I'm off the horse, I might as well continue to be off the horse. And what that person does on Good Friday and on Saturday and on Sunday and on Monday, when they go in and there's leftovers in the break room or cookies or some dessert that's given, and then there's the party, it gets real easy to allow that to form a new trend, but that is your decision. And it's really interesting that this is actually used in smoking cessation as a side note. So you can predict whether somebody is going to quit smoking successfully, distilled down to the observation of whether they um, after 6 months of not smoking, consider them a smoker that's trying to quit or a non-smoker. If they consider themselves a non-smoker, if they had a random cigarette, they would continue not smoking. If they consider themselves a smoker that's trying to quit, then they will take that cigarette and they will define it as them failing at their attempt to try and they will resume smoking. And so I always like to say, if an alcoholic could stop after one shot of whiskey, it wouldn't be alcoholism, right? The damage of alcoholism isn't the first shot, it's clearing out the liquor cabinet after the first shot. The same thing is true with these types of events. Having an exception day, right? Thanksgiving isn't the problem. It's that you allowed Thanksgiving to tell yourself a story that you were a failure or you fell off or slipped up or you broke your streak. And then from that, you then overeat Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you're more lax throughout the week. And we start to hear that a new trend has formed. So take a peek at that. Look at your exception mindset and prepare to note that in the next 30 days, there are probably going to be five exceptions. If you let those five exceptions be exceptions, you'll have 25 fairly normal days surrounding them. If you let those 5 days be failures, you are going to watch them become the start of a new trend, and you will watch 4 weeks of eating more compulsively. You'll start saying that you're craving things. And this is all psychologically rooted in the internal narrative you've decided. And so it's important now to decide that you have an exception mindset and you know that there's going to be some exceptions coming, and that is okay. With that, how do we navigate our exceptions? Well, my absolute favorite rule or guideline that I like to pose to people during the holiday season is what I call the highlight reel. The highlight reel is recognizing that there's going to be a lot of food in the next 5 weeks. And you're not excited about all of it. You're excited about certain things. For example, if I ask someone what's their favorite holiday food and they tell me cookies, that is not a complete answer. What cookies? Whose cookies? Because we tend to have nostalgic relationships with holiday foods, right? And so it is really important to get clear on what your highlight reel is. The simple example would be if you think your highlight reel is cookies this time of year, then you're going to subconsciously grab cookies every time cookies are available. And we all know that there are cookies in your office, there are cookies in your house, there are cookies at the neighbors, there are cookies everywhere, and some of them are just not that great, right? We don't need to say yes to every cookie. If you know, for example, that you like certain types of cookies, snickerdoodles and peanut butter blossoms, you will suddenly go to do what's called a creative constraint, where your mind will only light up when you see snickerdoodles and peanut butter blossoms. You can then take it a step further and you could say, well, I only like Aunt Mildred's peanut butter blossoms, or I get very excited for Aunt Mildred's peanut butter blossoms, in which case you will light up when you see Aunt Mildred's peanut butter blossoms, but you may find yourself a bit more neutral for the other ones. And so it's worthwhile to really take some time and brainstorm like, what are the things you're truly excited about? Said differently, if I had asked you in July, what's the thing you're looking forward to in the holidays? What are the things that popped up in your mind immediately? Or if I asked you in July, what were your favorite foods you had last holiday season would pop in your food in your mind immediately? It probably isn't the Eaton Park cookie on a Tuesday, right? At the office. It's probably something a bit more special than that. And so those are the things we need to be thinking about is let's focus on our highlight reel. Let's find our highlights, the things that we are most excited about, the things that we can prioritize and get really excited to, and look forward to. And you'll find that this holiday season, it gets easier and easier to focus on the good things and then pass on all the excess because it's undeniable that there's a lot of extra and a lot of excess this time of year. And so look at the next month, think about the parties you're going to go to, the events you're going to go to, who you're going to see, and like what are the things you're most looking forward to. Keep that in mind, make that list happen. And the comment being, then make sure you enjoy those things, especially on Thanksgiving. It's the whole point of having 17 dishes isn't necessarily to eat everything unless you like to be the person that has a plate of a little bit of everything, in which case, please enjoy that. That sounds great. But if instead of that, you really like stuffing or you really like mashed potatoes, make sure you give yourself a larger helping of the thing you like, right? If you have a plate that's full of everything and you only like half the things on the plate, you're going to be disappointed. And guess who's going to go back for seconds? And so I always call that the plight of the dinner roll, right? You're at the front of a buffet line. There's always that bowl of dinner rolls, and you put the dinner roll on your plate because you're kind of waiting to get to the next thing, to get to the first spoon so you can scoop stuff up. Um, and then by the time you get to the end of the buffet, you're like, where in the heck am I going to put this dinner roll? And you have to like set it on top of all the food. And in hindsight, you really didn't need it. That this time of year, there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of extra stuff that you'll grab just to grab. Get an idea of what you're really excited about and give yourself a double serving of the things you like and then pass on some of the stuff that's less important to you. It's an abundant time and we don't need to eat everything. We need to enjoy the things we want to enjoy and prioritize those experiences. So that's your highlight reel. The last tip that I'll give with this piece is the resilience mindset, which is builds on this highlight reel and builds on the exception mindset, but it's a strategy to help you think about how to make it an exception. I call it the holiday mindset. These are holidays, right? Thanksgiving is a day. What you do on Friday, Saturday, Sunday doesn't need to resemble what you did on Thursday. And the 20 days that are in between the end of the November and the start of the Christmas time, not every single day has to be. People tend to make this a holly month, if you will, instead of a holiday. And so what I will note there is let's make sure that no matter what we're doing, right, on our holidays, enjoy your pieces of your favorite things, right? Practice your highlight reel. And then let's make sure we leave it in the day. So no matter what, the next day, let's get back to some sort of basics. A good example is Thanksgiving Day, you're going to probably eat generous helpings and eat more than you normally would. Fun. You then are going to have leftovers Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well, turkey with mashed potatoes and green beans looks a lot like chicken rice and broccoli if you portion it, right? Same thing with stuffing. Like the carb, protein, and vegetable is still there. But if you're giving yourself triple helpings of everything and eating like Thanksgiving Day, your Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are going to be bigger and bigger and bigger too. And so what we have to think about is, hey, let's have our holiday where we have our exceptions. And then no matter what, let's bounce back the next day. Let's get back to a good rhythm. It doesn't mean we don't still eat some of the foods or enjoy them, but we get back to more sensible portions. We balance things out a little bit better. We get back to an eating routine that makes sense. We can use our leftovers intelligently. We don't have to eat our leftovers like we did on the holiday. So don't let the holiday turn into a solemn month. So those are those key focuses. Those are those practices that I want to make sure that I share with all of you so that you're prepared to go into this time of year. Like I said, we want to make sure we're paying attention to our exception mindset. We're using our resilience to bounce back. So we're identifying our exceptions, we're prioritizing them, we're looking forward to them, and then we're seeing them through and then bouncing back to our norm. We are using our highlight reel to create clarity of what we're truly excited about. And we're recognizing that what these things will do, the exception mindset, the bounce back mindset, and the highlight reel, is it will allow you to say yes to things that matter and also move on, which means it will allow you to create a moderation environment, right? And moderation is mastery. Moderation is you living like the healthier version of you. It will allow you to break a cycle if you've been in it where you're either overly, you go over the top during the holidays, or you shy away and avoid and restrict. Both of those things are attempts to deal with a time of year that doesn't really land and set you up. With these things, you'll be able to get through this time of year enjoying your favorite things, feeling connected to favorite things, having plenty of days that felt normal, which means you won't feel so bloated, swollen, and sick. You'll have enjoyed the highlights and you'll have moved on. And it can turn out to just be another month. All of a sudden, this is no longer a time of year to get stressed about or worked up about. This is now a time of year to simply enjoy and look forward to. And it's just another thing to deal with. And so I will leave you with one last thought, and then I'm actually going to open it up to questions. But I like to observe that, I don't know if you guys saw, this was a couple years ago, that like over 95% of the people on Biggest Loser gained the weight back and then some within 3 or 5 years of the show. And the reason behind that was because The Biggest Loser is taking a bunch of people out of their environment and putting them in a box and feeding them specific things with no access to other things, exercising them in a forced way with constant supervision, and providing them with no distractions. And so, yeah, we go and put you in a lab and we feed you a certain way and move you a certain way and give you no access to alternatives. Your body weight's going to change, and pretty dramatically, depending on how extreme the interventions are. The problem is we then drop that person back off in their hometown where their spouse's favorite meal, their favorite restaurant, their favorite dessert, their favorite drink, their favorite go to habits, their emotional tendencies, their fridge, their pantries, everything is back into their life. And while they were away ignoring the world, they learned nothing about how to live healthier. Diets are not effective for most people because they are preaching the avoidance and abstinence of things, which is a short-sighted temporary thing, right? We don't we don't progress long term through that measure, through putting the blinders on and ignoring everything. That doesn't work long term. And so this is a time of year where I don't want you to put your blinders on. I don't want you to go ignore the world biggest loser style, right? Because they learned nothing about their environment. Being healthier is not avoiding your environment, it's learning to navigate your environment. And that's what this time of year can be for you. So I challenge all of you to have some fun with this year. Challenge yourself to eat this month ahead differently than you did last year. Make sure you hit your favorite things. Say yes to the things you like the most. Say no to the things that you can pass on. And try and eat like the healthier version of you. Try and find that balance where you're prioritizing the things that matter and deprioritizing the things that don't. As you get better at it, you'll get better every time you try it, a little at a time, better and better and better. What you'll find is that instead of doing the Biggest Loser style of lifestyle, which is ignore the world and try and create progress in a box and then be surprised or act surprised when the progress is regressed because you didn't learn how to navigate. What if we learned to navigate the environment? What if we could get better at the holidays so the holidays weren't this distraction or weren't this setback? These are opportunities we have to get better. And the only way we do it is by practicing it. And so I challenge you all, gauntlet thrown this year, to try out some of these mindsets, to see if you can do the holidays a little differently than last year. And please don't hesitate to reach out, shoot me an email, and share what you experienced and what you saw, the favorite things you enjoyed and the things that you passed on, and how it differed from the prior year. I'd love to hear from you. But I hope these mindsets will equip you with a chance to go into this holiday season feeling more balanced, feeling more capable, and feeling more positive in terms of getting better at living like the healthiest you. So, thank you all for the attention, and I will pause this recording